One way to Trump's heart, of course, is to nominate him for a Nobel Peace Prize, which is clearly part of what he's fixated on. I don't know, maybe because Obama won it. I wanted to ask about that. So at the White House last Friday, we had this kind of interesting scene where the leaders of Azerbaijan and Armenia signed a joint declaration rebranding a contested regional transit corridor between the two countries as the, quote, Trump route for international peace and prosperity. Trump is touting this both as a commercial venture for the U.S. as well as a personal diplomatic win. Both the Prime Minister of Armenia and President of Azerbaijan have said they would endorse Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. This is the first, it's not a comprehensive peace deal. It's the first kind of formal signed commitment between the two countries aimed at ending the conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia since some ceasefire agreements ended a war there in the 90s. It's worth noting that Azerbaijan had essentially won the kind of proximate cause of the war when they seized control of the contested region of Nagorno-Karabakh and ethnically cleansed the Armenian population there. So this is kind of Trump coming in after a lot of the action had played out. But this joins a growing list of world leaders who've taken the route of endorsing Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize to stay in his good graces. This includes everybody from the Cambodian prime minister, who credited Trump with helping to broker a ceasefire after the Thai-Cambodian border conflict, which we've talked about on this podcast. The government of Pakistan nominated him for a Nobel Peace Prize after the U.S. played a role in helping de-escalate conflict with India. Bibi Netanyahu has nominated Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize for bombing Iran, kind of counterintuitive. I want to play this clip. Here's what Trump had to say about his peacekeeping efforts recently, plus some highlights from the deal that he signed with the Prime Minister of Armenia and President of Azerbaijan.
Well, they should give me the Nobel Prize for Rwanda, and if you look, the Congo, or you could say Serbia, Kosovo, you could say a lot of them. You could say, the big one is India and Pakistan. I should have gotten it 4 or 5 times.
This declaration establishes what they are calling a great honor for me. I didn't ask for this. The Trump route for international peace and prosperity.
Trump deserved to have a Nobel Peace Prize, and we will defend that, and we will promote for that.
Can I have a suggestion?
Yes.
So maybe we agree with Prime Minister Pashinyan to send a joint appeal to Nobel Committee to award President Trump with the Nobel Peace Prize, because...
All right. So I just have a thought here, which is that I think people need to understand, first of all this list of conflicts, like these are, to the short-term point, most of them are Band-Aids, right? Like the issue in the Democratic Republic of Congo is not resolved. It's kind of a ceasefire, but the underlying problems remain, including the presence of Rwandan-backed militias controlling resources. The issue in India and Pakistan, we're going to de-escalate. The U.S. kind of, they went through the same pattern they always do. The U.S. played the same role it always does. It makes some phone calls. Things de-escalate probably on their own momentum. Thailand and Cambodia were not going to fight some huge war over what is kind of a constant border dispute. So in many of these cases, he kind of comes in, does the normal things that the U.S. always does, and frankly, that the EU always does too, and then just puffs them up, right? But these leaders have found out that just saying, you should get the Nobel Peace Prize is probably a way to avoid, I don't know, a higher tariff or something. I do want to ask you, you are a very global citizen. You're sitting in the UK. What on earth does this look like from the outside? What do people make of this strange fixation on the Nobel Peace Prize?
Who doesn't want a Nobel Peace Prize?
Yeah, apparently, yeah.
So I'm not going to judge him on that. I get it. Like, who doesn't want it? But it's what's extraordinary, actually, is to see, as you say, a bandage on the DRC Rwanda issue, Cambodia, Thailand, India, Pakistan, which, by the way, I was tracking that conflict incredibly closely and speaking to the Indians, speaking to the Pakistanis, speaking to leadership on both sides. The Pakistanis saw it as a win for themselves, and for India, they were incensed because for 2 decades or so, they have had this kind of bipartisan support where they've built, strategic partnership with the United States. And this term, you'll remember, Ben, that was often used to describe Afghanistan, Pakistan as AFPAC.
Oh, God,
they
yeah.
don't want to be, India Pac. They don't want that kind of, they see themselves as a proper superpower, versus a country that they see is spinning constantly out of control, and that, has the military and has its intelligence agency, and its civilian government is completely powerless. India sees itself as a powerhouse now, regionally and frankly globally, and not necessarily an ally of the United States, but a strategic partner. So whether it's, getting hit with these tariffs, or whether it's meddling in an age-old conflict that's gone on for decades and decades, and frankly, what we saw in that previous conflict of a few months ago is the red lines continue to move, and it gets more and more dangerous. So the next time you see, a flare-up between any of these two sides, they've just basically pushed the boundaries a little bit further. So Donald Trump saying, you can all come to the White House and we can all have a group hug and a photo, and I'm going to have to get a Nobel Peace Prize out of this, or have some, transit route named after me. It's sure. I think that sometimes his transactional approach works, and perhaps it's more than, if I think back to the Biden administration, I can't remember a single conflict that they tried to resolve, frankly. I mean, what we saw at the end of the Biden administration was the disaster in Afghanistan. Ukraine felt it was a war of attrition, and frankly, 40,000 Palestinians dead, because they couldn't push enough pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government. So perhaps Donald Trump's fixation is leading him to put all these bandages on everything, but he's not getting the big prize, right? He's not getting a ceasefire in Gaza, which is, there's mounting pressure for that to happen globally. And he's not able to put enough pressure on Putin. So in the end, it's going to be the Ukrainians who lose, and frankly, probably the Palestinians who lose.